Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the legend, Tommy Wildfire Rich.
What's
What's
up,
up, man?
CG? Man, we've been trying for a couple of days. We finally made it.
Yes, sir. That's all that matters, man. But what you been up to lately, Tommy Rich?
Lord, I tell you what, man, it's been, we moved to Myrtle Beach about a year ago, man. Just living the dream, man. We've been down, like I said, been here about a year. I had a wrestling school here before. And anyway, it was in a tourist town, and it just didn't work out. But we fell in love with Myrtle Beach, and so we bought a condo down here, and we moved to Myrtle Beach. Enjoy. I'd like to tell you I've been out surfing, but I don't think I could stand up on one of them boards. Actually, I would watch them surf.
Yeah, man. But tell me what really got you influenced into the wrestling business, man. Like, what started you?
Well, when I was a little kid, man, we used to, my dad, he was a good friend of Eddie Marlin's, which wrestled in Tennessee. And him and my dad went down there to try out. And I guess my dad, it was a little much for him. He quit. And Eddie Marlin kept wrestling. He refereed and started wrestling. I used to go with Eddie Marlin to the wrestling matches, And so I grew up around it, wrestled in school. And had the opportunity. I had a partial scholarship to Louisville, Kentucky. I could catch the ball good, but I wasn't quite fast enough. But so Jerry Jarrett, he married Eddie Marlin's daughter, which he was a promoter there in Nashville. So my mom and dad got a divorce, so I couldn't afford to do that. And ended up, I talked to Jerry and Eddie about wrestling, and for about 6 months, I'd go over there. And I guess they just tried to run me off. They'd say, "Come over here, we'll work out." Well, I'd go over there, and they'd be leaving to go wrestle or something. So, but I kept coming back, so they finally said, "Well, we ain't gonna run him off." So they took me, and Tojo Yamamoto trained me, and then of course I trained for about 6 months. Of course, like I said, I grew up around wrestling and wrestling in school. So after about 6 months, they took me to Tupelo, Mississippi, and I went to referee, but they didn't tell me actually I was going to wrestle. They just didn't want me to be worried about it, all day. So I got there and I wrestled Phil Hickerson my first match. And, for your first match, of course, Phil Hickerson about 280 pounds. And we had a decent little match. But the next night, I wrestled his partner in Jonesboro, Arkansas. And his name was Tank Patton, and he hadn't been wrestling about 6 months. And he's about 300 pounds and 6'6". And we both had two left feet that night. I thought, Lord, I don't know if I'm going to make it in this business or not, But, you take the good with the bad, and through it all, I survived it and never looked back.
Well, yeah, you got to go through those bumps a little bit when you have like some work experience. When you get into the business, you got to go through the struggles in the beginning, then you start to move up eventually.
Yeah, but that was what's so cool with it too. A lot of guys, they'll work out a year, 2 years, whatever, and in 6 months. And really, to me, I think I learned more after I started wrestling, because wrestling in front of a crowd and stuff, you can go to the gym and you can learn the moves, but and in our business back then, it was an ad-lib business. I think today it's more choreographed to where, you might have an opening and a middle spot, and then you'd have the ending. And so you just go out there and then you'd play to the crowd. Whatever they was buying, that's what you were selling, And if something happened and they wasn't buying what you was selling, you were able to change it up. Whereas today, I think it's a little harder because you know what you're doing from the beginning to the end. So I think it makes it a little harder on these guys. And as far as for me, I don't even know. I had enough time focusing on the wrestling part to have to worry about remembering every move I did. So, it's a different business today, and of course these guys jump off of buildings today too. I was at Graham, but shoot, I've been doing it 45 years, so very blessed. So the ground route worked good for me.
Yeah, it sure did. You've been doing it for 45 years. You've had your big matches. Like, you've had your match with Harley Race, which got you to win the world title, man. Like, tell me how that went into play, man.
Well, I think Harley just really did like me a lot, and And of course I wrestled him every time he come to Georgia, and I think Harley had a lot to do with me winning the title. And just you talk about a ring general. I mean, if you didn't know nothing, you could go in there. If you couldn't have a match with Harley Race, you would never have a match with nobody because Harley could dance with everybody.
Yeah, Harley was just a tough wrestler at the time. Everybody was either afraid of him or they just couldn't work with this guy. But this guy, if he liked you, he'll put you over, man.
Yeah, and I never, of course, I like there again. I was very blessed. I really can't think of nobody I ever had a problem with, in the back or out in the ring, either one. It's just a good group of guys. And I got to wrestle in Georgia. I got to, in Tennessee. We used to go. I did my first angle with, of course, back in the day, Nick Goulas on one half of Tennessee and Jerry Jarrett on the other half. So for my first angle, I went to Nick Goulas' territory, and I started there. And we used to, after the TV show, we did a live TV show there in Chattanooga. And as soon as we get through, we'd go to the restaurant, and you could see Channel 17. The cable would come in there. And I always thought, boy, if I ever make it to Georgia, I'll be made the big time. But just getting in Tennessee, I mean, I made the big time. But it was just that TBS, went all over the country. And so that's where the big boys and all of the best come through Georgia. I mean, because it was such a powerful TV that you'd be in Georgia, but when you got off that Georgia TV, you'd be good to go to Florida or Kansas City for Bob Geigel or up for the Crockett's, every who, because you was off that TV, it just made you stronger.
Yeah, I mean, with all that, I mean, TBS, like in Georgia, like that was like a big TV deal then. And then you guys had like a lot of these good promoters. I mean, I think Dusty Rhodes was a promoter in Florida, right?
Well, Eddie Graham was the promoter. Dusty was the booker.
Okay, he was the booker. Yeah, so it was Graham.
Eddie Graham owned it. Dusty, of course, Dusty pretty much run it, though, I think.
Yeah, and then when you look at, like you said, in Tennessee, you had Jerry Jarrett, and then you had one of them in Texas called, what is it, Paul Bosch or something?
Paul Bosch, he run the Houston end, and then
the Von Erich ran the Dallas.
So big, he run the other side, like San Antonio and that part. So it was, I mean, there was, I don't know how many wrestling promotions there were state to state, because like I said, shoot, at the time, Tennessee, even up in Knoxville, had a wrestling promotion up there. So there were 3 different wrestling promotions in Tennessee, that were NWA.
Yeah, especially with all the work over there. I mean, then you had Jerry Lawler working in between with Jerry Jarrett, which you ever had? Yeah. I mean, you got trained by him, right?
Tojo trained me, but I did one of my first angles with Jerry Lawler. Of course, back in the day, me and him probably bumped heads, but I tell you what, I learned a lot from Jerry, and and of course now we get along real well. But back then we were both young, and just everybody has their own opinions, and so. But I'll have to say, he taught me, he taught me, and I tell you, Jerry Lawler, another one that was a great, in his day. So he still get out and kick it some. So. I mean, I got to wrestle the best of the best, even there in Tennessee. I mean, shoot, I remember, I always remember I started when I was just turned 18. And I remember we stayed at the Admiral Bimbo, and I remember Big Bad John and Danny Hodge just stands out more to me than any of them. You see the guys, you remember who Danny Hodge was?
Yeah, one of those other wrestlers you guys wrestled the territory.
Yeah, but Danny Hodge was he was a former boxer, ex-boxer, but he had that double tendon strength in his hand. He could take and actually squeeze it out and bust it, not sit and just listen to them guys talk. Of course, I was scared to say anything in there amongst them men because I was still just a kid, so I was kind of mesmerized too, but I knew to keep my mouth shut.
Yeah, like especially with him, he was a tough guy too. So you had your own tough guys then, like which is Harley Race was another one, but then you had Bruiser Brody, another tough guy in the territory. What was it like to work with this guy? I heard there were some interesting stories from other wrestlers, man.
Well, Bruiser, I'll tell you what, Buck Robley was booking Georgia is when I first met Bruiser, and he was always nice to me, and then of course Georgia. Went under. Jerry Blackwell opened up Southern Wrestling right there in the Georgia area, and Bruiser and Jerry Blackwell were good friends, so he would come in, and worked the territory, and they were good friends. So he would come to my house and stay instead of having Jerry get him a room to save him some cheese, So he'd come out the house and, just to see him, you're like, but he'd tell me stories about how he'd building his kids tree houses and stuff like that, just a side of him that I ain't even never heard. He was, just a very special man. And it sucks what happened to him. It's just a sad situation, but just Bruce Brody. I mean, some people you may or may not like him, but he was always a gentleman to me. So,
I've heard different sides of him. Like he was like somebody that wanted to get paid from the promoters, was very difficult, but was very friendly with certain wrestlers. So it wasn't like if you got on his good side, he wouldn't mess with you like that.
Yeah, and as far as that, he just stood up for what he thought was right. Now, I mean, everybody has a contract. Back then, you didn't have contracts. So if you didn't say something, I mean, and he might have been outspoken about it, but I mean, was he wrong? Maybe not, so who knows?
Maybe some promoters were being a little petty with him, and that's why he had to stand up for something. Like that's kind of like me being like a independent contract for a company. If they're not paying me my money, I'm going to confront them about it. Of course.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and like I said, and then and you're an independent contractor too in this business. So if you don't stand up for yourself, ain't nobody else.
That's facts right there. I mean, that's just how some wrestlers are, especially if they don't have a contract and they are trying to make the most out of it. Like then when you look at the matches that I've seen that stood out to me was, didn't you had your little angle with Gino Hernandez or no?
No, but I was wrestling in the territory with him. He was doing an angle with Tully Blanchard back then when I went to work there for Paul Bosch. But I tell you what, now you talking about another heck of a talent, though. Gino, of course, he had the looks. He could talk good on the tube, and he could wrestle. So he had everything that you would want. I mean, we lost him at a young age too. He had a lot, he had a lot going for him, and it sucks. We've lost a lot of good talent at a young age, man. I mean, like in my age group, just uselessly. I think that. Some of these guys are gone, and it's sad to hear, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of his promos, a lot of the stuff he did, and in the wrestling in the ring, he was outstanding. Like as a heel, like he started off as a babyface. He started off as a babyface, then he turned on his trainer Jose Vasfario, and then he did his own thing.
Yeah, and I think he was a much better heel because he had that arrogance about him. I mean, he was like me when I first started. I was a good babyface because I was a cornbread humble kid. So and Gino was full of himself. So it was two different characters, but he was like I think. Of course, I mean, as a heel, I did pretty good too. But for years, I was a babyface. But Gino, I think he was more productive as a heel than he was a babyface.
Yeah, when Gino was a heel, everybody hated him. They even threatened the guy. And that just tells you how much he does his job. Like when I've seen a lot of his promos, it did piss off a lot of people. And that was what made the business more interesting that's what created a lot of heat there.
Well, and I think that's the way the business. It's always been good versus evil, and I think it's not as much that now. I mean, I just think it's what I'm saying, like in betweeners or something. You know what I mean? I mean, it's like you was either a good guy or a bad guy. And if you was a bad guy, you didn't sign autographs or you portrayed. Of course, most of them guys, if they was a bad guy, they were. I mean, that was you pretty much. I mean, your character. I mean, that's who you was, really. I mean, you look at Baron von Raschke, Ryan Koloff, Buzz Sawyer, Bruiser Brody. I mean, them were all characters, man. And they're self-made. I mean, that's just who they were.
Yeah. Yeah, like the characters, like the way they play it, it's like it's believable in some ways. But speaking of the one match I kind of checked in, like you and Ric Flair put on a pretty solid match at one point, right? And then there was like a last match he had.
Yeah, I wrestled Rick quite a bit because he come to Georgia a lot. And of course, I was a Georgia heavyweight champion, so I would always get the draw, Rick. And of course, Rick liked to go all night long. So they'd say go 30, we'd go close to an hour. But that was Rick. I mean, he did that every night. You got to respect that, man, because he'd be in a different, he might be in, say, the Georgia Championship Wrestling area. He might have been there for 2 days, at the most. And then he'd go, I mean, he was on the road, probably at least 300 days a year, if not more than that, So, and just to do that, you got to be a special person, let alone getting in there and going an hour Broadway or going 45 minutes every night. So yeah.
It has to take a lot for this guy to take a title, but then I've seen a couple of shoot interviews about him, and a guy named Ole Anderson put it like he only gave him the title so he can get out of the territory or some shit like that.
He did, yeah.
Well, he wanted him out of here.
Yeah, Ole was quite the character too, though. When I first went to Georgia, he didn't care too much about me. I think if it'd been up to him, I wouldn't have stayed there. But anyway, I stayed and I got over. And of course, the first night I was there, I wrestled Abdullah the Butcher. He beat me in 30 seconds, busted my head. Tony Atlas saved me. And I thought, oh God, I need to go back to Tennessee, that maybe this ain't the place for me. But I stuck it out. And just like we was talking earlier, when you first start wrestling, it's a learning experience. And I stayed there and sucked it up, took it in, and here I am today. So we talking, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a good thing with all the training and all the experience. And then, did you ever work for Bill Watts' promotion or no?
I just in and out. Never really. The only areas that I really worked for was Georgia and Tennessee.
Georgia and Tennessee.
I'd have a run there in Georgia, and if I got burnt out, I'd go home to Tennessee. So I was very blessed. I didn't have to travel around the country like a lot of guys did, man. And of course, that Georgia territory was so good because you was home every night by midnight, So I mean, it really, like North Carolina, even in Watts' territory, them guys would be on the road 2 or 3 days, and they would do some outlandish miles. They traveled, then wrestled, then head to another town. It was. I was out there one time and I was with Jim Duggan, and we went into Gillies. We had got through wrestling, got to the town we was going to, and Gillies bar was there. So we go in. He said, "You watch. Before we get out of here, I'll get in the fight." I thought, if I'm gonna mess with somebody, it'd be this little blonde-headed fella. It wouldn't be you. So anyway, sure enough, as soon as we go in the door, we go to the bathroom. I'm in a little stall, and there's one of them urinal thing. Along when Jim's sitting there, and this boy walked in right off the bat and said, "You sure are a big, ugly MF." Duggan looked at me and said, "See what I tell you?" Looked back, finished peeing. The boy said it again when he did. Duggan hit him, and we just walked on out. Duggan said, "I guess we better go." So we left. He knocked the boy out, and we left. And, and that was another character. I remember him coming to Tennessee when I first started. I got to meet the best of the best.
Yeah, you met the best, and you've worked with a lot of the best wrestlers.
Oh yeah, Coach Ken Batera, King Kong Mosca, Blackjack Lanza, Bobby Heenan. I get Ole and Ivan, and Ole and Gene. Of course, me and Wahoo McDaniels teamed up. Loved the Chief, man. He was very good people. He was another one. If he liked you, he loved you. And if he didn't, he didn't.
Yeah, Wahoo McDaniel was actually a former football player before he even did wrestling. And he could have got more of a bigger push, but he ran a promotion too, but he got a chance to at least. He was a good team. Everybody had a lot of good things to say about him. So he was well respected.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I loved Wahoo. Yeah, we had a lot of good times there in Georgia,
Yeah, Wahoo was like somebody that everybody got along with as far as working. He wasn't, I don't know, as much of a stiff guy, but I think he was a fantastic worker if he was the way he did it. I've seen a couple of these classic matches where you had him and Wahoo McDaniel and quite a few other guys.
Yeah, But shoot, at one time, from top to the bottom, your card was, your card from the top to the bottom. It was all good talent,
There was a lot of good talent then, and the way you guys came into the business, it was the hard way. And in today's wrestling, it's kind of like whatever, man. Like they have a chance to go in if they do the script.
Yeah, see, and I just I think about it, and I don't know if I could. It's hard. I mean, it's hard. Like used to, like as far as an interview. I mean, they tell you what to say now. Like, I mean, they told us, like, they'd say you're asking so and so, it's a no DQ, and you're in such and such a town. And if it was a minute and a half, you did the rest of the interview yourself. I mean, whatever you wanted to fill in, it wasn't a verbatim interview. I mean, you said it the way you wanted to, you know.
Yeah, sure is. And then there's just a lot of these guys during the territories. There was just a lot of good wrestlers at your time. You guys had the Hulk Hogan, who was just putting on his own mark, and then you had Macho Man coming into his own. And
they both come through Atlanta. Of course, Hulk was Terry Sterling then. He hadn't got he came in there, and then I think from there he left and went to the AWA for Vern, and then that's when he went to Vince and got the big break, you know. And then shoot, he was off to the races. And then Randy, he started there too. Randy started there in Georgia too, and then went to New York and got his big push too. I mean, like I say, there was a lot of good young talent that went through, and then I mean, a lot come through that already made a name, and there's a lot that left Georgia that went on to make a name for themselves.
Yeah, especially guys like I guess you can go on with the Georgia names. Like Dusty was like one of those guys that competed in Georgia.
And of course, Roddy Piper. Roddy was there. Don Morocco. Like I said, Kim Batera, Lord, Kill Carl Cox. Shoot, I could go on. I probably forgot half of them. You know, as many as I've named, there's that many more probably plus. You know, I mean, and of course, wrestling in the 80s and 90s. I started in 76. In the late 70s and the 80s was really cool. In the 90s, 95, 96. And then I think 98, I went to ECW and had to run there as a full-blooded Italian. yeah.
That's your guy.
I had a blast doing that too. I had a real good time. And it was pretty wild in that ECW too. I mean, there was a bunch of wild bucks up there too.
Yeah, ECW had a lot of crazy extreme fans, like when you had the Philadelphia fans, and then the matches were rarely intense. Like it was mostly a hardcore style type of match.
Shoot. I seen them boys get hit in the head. I mean, maybe somebody swing a chair at me, I'm throwing my arm up. I just stand there for it, man, bending chairs over each other's head. I said, not me. I mean, but they was some.
Yeah, that's where you started working for Paul Heyman. But before you even went to ECW, you were working for WCW under Jim Herd. What was it like to work with this guy? I heard he was like a difficult dude to deal with.
Well, I think what it was is Jim Herd was like he worked for Pizza Hut, and he was like the big man with Pizza Hut. And they thought but that's different, booking a wrestling show and taking care of Pizza Huts too, I mean, he might have been good at it and made them draw money, but wrestling was a different horse, and I don't think he didn't have to deal with talent doing what he was doing before he did that. I think that was his problem. But I went back, and when I first went back to Georgia after Crockett had bought it, I think, anyway, he was doing he was running it. He wasn't the booker; it was a committee, but he was in charge. He had the last say, and I think it just. And he was dealing with men that had been in wrestling all their life, and he just come into wrestling and didn't really know a lot about it. I don't think.
Yeah, a lot of those guys who just come into a position that they had no experience for, but then. I don't know. There was this one story where he came at you and told you, "Are you like something about your drinking issue during the match or something like that?"
Oh, when I first went back, when I first went back, he told me, he said, "Tommy," he said, "I'm gonna give you a perfect example," and which is pretty cool what he told me. I can remember this story, so it was a good story. He told me, he said, "Tommy," he said, "you like to drink," he said, "but." Anybody told me that they wasn't going to allow it or whatever. He said, I'll give you an example. He said, Tommy, you could be standing out in front of a bar and not being in it, and somebody ride by and see you and say, Tommy Rich was at the bar drunk. Well, what I mean, so I always remembered that, but I always did my job. I might like to drink beer every now and then, but it is what it is.
Yeah, sure is, man. But as
I could
long
go
as you
out there
still
and go
perform.
down the Broadway, I mean, if I did what I never did, I always did what I was asked to do. So I don't see, as far as interfering with a job, I don't think it ever did.
Sure is. I mean, here's a good question. Which match would you say is the best match you've ever had?
Well, that would have to be the night I won the world heavyweight title in Augusta, Georgia. I mean, of course, and remember I told you about Abdullah, beat me in 30 seconds, the first night I was there. Well, he told me, he said, "Hey, kid," he said, "I'll give it back to you." And I was just 18. I thought, yeah, right. And anyway, getting back to Wahoo, we was at Thanksgiving night. We was at the Omni, and Wahoo was supposed to wrestle Abdullah in the main event. And Ole and Wahoo got into a fuss about something. So Wahoo said he quit. So anyway, I asked Abdullah who he wanted to wrestle, and he said, "I want the kid." They always called me the kid because I was young. And so anyway, I wrestled Abdullah, and he told me, he said, "Tonight's your night." And I probably weighed about 210 pounds, and we get in the ring, and you ain't supposed to fight on the floor. And of course, they got the rail around it. You dang sure ain't supposed to go outside the rail. Of course, with Abdullah, anything went, he said, "Follow me, kid." So we fought up in the stands, come back, and I'm nailing it, boom, boom, boom. He says, "Slam me, kid, slam me." And of course, I was about 210, 220 at the most. Abdullah was probably 400 pounds, 350, probably closer to 4. But anyway, he said, "Slam me, kid." And I'm thinking, now I'm going to go do this, and he's going to embarrass me. I ain't even going to be able to pick him. I reached down and grabbed him, and shoot, he went up like he was lighter than I did. And I slammed him, and that whole building went. I get goosebumps, and I go, woo. And after that, it was just off to the races for me. So he did, he did give it back.
Yeah, that kind of scoop slam seemed like a Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant type of move, like where people were doing the pop, but you lifted up Abdullah the Butcher, who's like 400 pounds. That's no joke, man. That guy's big.
No. And he went up the light as a feather. I mean, I'm telling you what, he sure give it back to me because after that, I mean, Wildfire was on fire.
That's why the name is Wildfire, man, because you get on fire. I can see why that's a nickname.
Tony Atlas give me that name. We were the first salt and pepper team in Georgia to win the tag titles. And we was on TV one day, and something was said. He said, "He's like a wildfire." In that ring, he's just like a wildfire, Gordon Soley. And after that, it stuck. And it's, of course, my wife, she called me Brushfire now, but anyway, it was Wildfire then.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's a good nickname. I thought it was like, I mean, it seems more catchy because of what they say. And then, here's a good one. I didn't even mention Terry Funk, but you got any stories of Terry Funk?
Oh, Lord, yeah, Terry, Terry, Dory. I mean, there's another class that come through Georgia. Terry was just crazy, I mean, I never did run around with him a whole lot, but when he'd come in, he was always nice. I remember him telling me one time, him and Dory was on the way somewhere in Texas, and they stopped this little store, and he said, "These girls come running up the car," and I guess Channel 17 just been on. They said, asked him, was Tommy Rich in the car, He said, "I thought they was running up to see me." He said, "They wanted to see you. I just told them to go on." You wasn't with us. But yeah, Terry, I had, of course, the Briscoes. They used to come into Atlanta a lot. Jack, Jerry, had a lot of good times with them. And, of course, Roddy. I mean, shoot, you go on all day naming names. It was in Georgia.
Mostly a lot of the guys you work with were either in Georgia or Tennessee, from what you're telling me.
Well, no, like Terry and them guys, I mean, they were from, everybody come through Georgia that was in it just from every territory, If you come to Georgia, because everybody wanted to be on that Channel 17 because it was so powerful. It just went everywhere. So if you got on TV and you was in a decent spot, it don't even matter if you was semi. If you went there and did good, then you'd go to the next territory and they put you on top just because of the TV, because it was so powerful and the people already knew who you were, So it kept, like usually if you went into territory, it takes 6 to 8 weeks or whatever to get you over. Well, off of that TV, if you was doing anything, that counted, then shoot, when you went somewhere else, you was hotter than firecrackers. You know, you got to push then. So it was that TBS was hot.
Yeah, it was like, especially when you had your matches, people would still say, "Hey, this guy was on TV." Like you were like on the spot too. So like anytime somebody saw you, they'd call you the Wildfire and all the
Yeah.
matches. But like, I think what makes you so noticeable is like when you beat Harley Race, which some wrestlers couldn't have had the chance to do that. Like, I mean, there were some wrestlers that got into the business early, but they didn't get that big push like you did. You know?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, and there again, though, it was just I was something different. You know, it was all big, rugged guys or big, ugly guys or whatever. And here I was, a little cornbread kid, 18, starting into wrestling. Uh, so it gave me opportunity. And like when I first went to Georgia, you know, TBS Turner was just starting his cable. So all he had wrestling and he had the Atlanta Braves. And of course, back then, the Braves wasn't really very good. So really, he depended on the wrestling, and the wrestling's what put him on the map.
Yeah, wrestling, the product was more selling than the Braves at the time. So it's like when anybody in Georgia wanted to watch something on TBS, it always came up with wrestling or anything like that. Like that
Yeah,
was the more popular part.
yeah. Oh, exactly. I mean, he showed old movies and stuff, but as far as making his mark, of course, he owned the Braves, so naturally he had them on there all the time too. But the wrestling's, I think, what really put him on the map.
Yeah, without a doubt. Oh, how was your feud with the Fabulous Freebirds? Yeah, that's a spectacular tag team I've heard of. Like those three
Oh
guys.
Lord, yes, sir. They were they were Big Terry. There's another one gone. God bless. Uh, but they were, you know, they were shoot. I guess they were the first ones to use music. You know, I mean, they were ahead of their time. And of course, it was Michael and Big Terry, and then they had Buddy Roberts, and then I think after Buddy left, then they had Jimmy Garvin, and they were a heck of a tag team then too. And Michael, I mean, as far as mouthpiece, that Mike, he could cut a promo.
Yeah, he did. And he would always open his mouth, but then he becomes a very successful commentator too, and then all the
Yeah,
other stuff. I mean, he could do it all. That's why they call him multi-personality, because he can do mostly the commentator also and do a lot of everything. So he
yeah,
was a good work.
he was really good on the mic. I mean, and Mike could wrestle too. But I mean, as far as I mean, you know, he had the looks and on the mic. I mean, couldn't nobody do it any better. I mean, he was good on the mic.
Yeah, he was. Here's another one before we get to the next one right here. What's your thoughts of the current NWA show? If you could he could make any changes to it, what would he do?
I think the NWA show. I mean, you know, it's still. I mean, I like if all I watch, I like to watch the NWA. I mean, they've got some good stuff on it. Of course, I'm NWA for life. You know, you know.
Just like the NWO version.
I used to watch it. I used to watch it when I was a kid, and I wrestled it. So, you know, I mean, it's all changed, but I mean, I like the NWA show.
Yeah, there's some still good talent out there. Like you got, I
Oh, I
mean,
mean, there's some great. I mean, there's some great talent out there. I mean, it's a different breed today, you know, than when I was doing it. I mean, shoot, these guys. Uh, I mean, hell, they could jump off of buildings. I mean, I couldn't jump, and I'd break my leg if I did. So, I mean, them guys. You know, my longevity's been so good, but I ain't never done the stuff that they do. You know, I mean, in ECW, I've seen a lot of that stuff. The guys in the ladder matches, and I think, boy, they done lost their mind, just crazy. You know, but the people just went crazy over it too.
yeah, it was. And then, you know, speaking of like when you went to ECW, there was some time where you were working with Jim Cornette during Smoky Mountain. What was it like to work with the likes of New Jack, man? I've heard a lot of crazy stories about this dude.
He was an acquired taste, I guess. I knew him in ECW. I knew Jack up in ECW, and he was always nice to me. But I've seen the other side of him too, you know. And I, like I said, I was just around him up there, like at the shows. I never did socialize with him too much, but yeah, I mean, you hear a lot of bad about him. I mean, he is, you know, I mean, we all make our own slate. And I don't know, you know, you hear a lot of bad about him. So I don't know.
No, I mean, I've seen some angles where he created a lot of heat to where Jim Cornette was forced to get rid of him because everybody in the Tennessee area didn't want him around.
Yeah, it's and like I said, and he didn't work for me. I imagine he was really hard if you was having to, if he worked for you, you know, as far as you being the promoter and him telling you what he wanted to do instead of you doing what you asked him to do. You know, I'm sure they had to deal with a lot with that.
Yeah, what was it like to deal with Jim Cornette as a worker?
Oh, shoot, I had a good run there. You know, in Smoky Mountain, he always treated me fair. I mean, uh, and there again, he got that mouth for it.
Yeah, he's like anytime he puts his mouth on, everybody wants to kick his ass.
Yep.
I mean, he's got some good stories, man. Especially that one incident at Dairy Queen's. I thought that comes down as legendary.
What was that?
That one incident where he had that Dairy Queen's incident where he wanted to order something and the person thought he like they didn't want the order yet, and then he just said, "No shit, I wanted the order," and then he goes right in front of the lady on the window and says shit about her, and then says, "You stupid cunt! I ordered this, and you wanted me to wait 30 minutes."
And that right there, you sound a lot like him, but yeah, that's the type of person he was too. You know, just me, I don't know. Now I might be snapped once or twice, but not over no Dairy Queen.
Over an order, like I guess the lady thought he was just kidding about the order, and then he just said, "We gotta wait this damn minute. You thought we were joking? God damn!" And then he went right straight and cussed her out.
Oh yeah, I've seen him cuss a few people out. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like this guy is like worth of comedy. Anytime you bring up the name Vince Russo or anything with Jim Hurd or I think Kevin Dunn, he snaps.
Yeah, he's another acquired taste too, I guess. I don't know, but as far as he did good in Smoky Mountain as far as promoting and drawing. Toward the end, it got bad, but it was good. I mean, now you talk about a good little that was a good wrestling area too. Was that's what I was talking about when Tennessee had three territories. You had Smoky Mountain, and you had Nick, and then you had of course Jarrett. So it was a lot of guys just traveled back and forth from there and did their wrestling career. You know, just got started here and go on up. Of course, Nick Goulas, a lot of people didn't like to work for him, but he wasn't excuse me. I heard him tell guys, "Boy, I'll have you farting through silk." You know, tell him how much money he's going to make. And I've seen him drive in and Lincoln and leave on a Greyhound. You know, he wasn't the best payoff man in the world.
Yeah, I've heard different payoffs from all other people. I don't know if this is true from what I'm hearing, but I heard Paul Heyman had to pay back some wrestlers, man, with all the checks and all that stuff. I don't know if there was any incident between you and Paul Heyman that didn't pay you.
No, I'd say that. Of course, I left before they went under too. I wasn't there when they, you know, at the end. I think I was there from '98 to 2000 or something like that, and. But I don't think I was there when when it was all over.
Okay, so when you got to ECW, you started joining the full-blooded Italians, which that was kind of intriguing. You kind of wanted to reinvent yourself more as a heel, so that was interesting.
Well, it was. I went up there, and I guess they didn't know actually what to do with me, and they come up with that idea, and they said, asked me, would I mind managing? And I said, well, it pay the same? They said, yeah. I said, well, no, I don't mind managing a bit. And of course, excuse me, but of course it took off too, the full-blooded Italians. Of course, me and Tracy Smothers, two Southern rednecks doing this. I imagine, and then little Guido with us doing the same thing. So I'm sure it pissed some of the folks off there in ECW. Well, I know it did, because didn't nobody in ECW, that crowd, like us.
They didn't like that one bit, but you said it got more heat on Guido than you did, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. His people looked at him like he was a nut. He out there with us. But I tell you what, him and Tracy was a heck of a tag team, too. They put them straps on them that night, and You know, people didn't expect it either. They thought it was going to go some other way. And so I think they really got the ECW fans when they put it on them, because we were just mid card. And but they put them belts on us, and that was another shot in the arm. I mean, we did good the whole time we was there.
Yeah, I mean, you guys had a good solid run with the group, and it was building solid heat there, so it was getting somewhere, you know.
Yeah. Oh Lord, yeah. And we was doing some in Tennessee high spots too that people ain't never seen none of them. so it was different. Instead of the blood and guts, we did a little of that Tennessee stuff, and it got over because it was something different.
You know? Yeah, a lot different style in Tennessee compared to what they had in Philadelphia. Like, you had some of your guys coming from ECW over there. Like, you had Jamie Dundee, who just created a different type of promo, different style of wrestling, because he came from Bill Dundee and all the other wrestlers like Jerry Jarrett and all those guys that were in the promotion like you were working for. But he created a lot of good heat for ECW also.
Yeah, bless his heart. I pierced his ear when he was 5 years old. Me and his daddy Bill did. Yeah, that's when Bill and them first come to Australia, and they lived in the same apartment complex as I did. And Jamie probably was about 5 or 6. And he seen our pierced ear or something. He wanted one, so we pierced his ear. Yeah, that's if he's a little crazy, he probably got a little to do with me and his dad.
Like, this guy, he kind of gets a little crazy, but man, when I was trying to get in contact with him, man, it's like when you schedule something with this guy, it's like it takes some days later to realize, oh shit, what time are we supposed to go to the show?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think he's been dodging me. I think it's because of the concussions and the reminder. Like, this guy, he's funny, but he kind of loses track of time, and he's been late from time to time.
Oh yeah, Lord, and I guess he don't do too much anymore. Or they wasn't. I know him and Wolfie D, but we had talking about the last angle, like in USWA. Me and Doug Gilbert, Dangerous Doug Gilbert, we did an angle with Wolfie and Jamie. And that was the last, probably the last good money that was drawn there. We did an angle. And of course, my mom did a promo. She come sit in our corner, and Wolfie's mama sitting there. I mean, you know, you do some crazy stuff in Tennessee, but them folks love that too, man. And they turn out. But we did, yeah, we had a heck of a little angle with them.
Yeah, like the angle was interesting, but then you had plenty of good matches, but then you look back at your career, man, like, wouldn't you wish that you could have gone to WWE at the time where it was WWF, or didn't really care for it?
Well, hindsight ain't worth nothing anyway, but sort of, I know I've done myself making some money, but at the same time, at the time I had a wife, I had 3 kids, and so it just, I'm just old Southern boy anyway. You know, the Big Apple, I don't know. It wasn't my kind of place, I don't guess. But but I look back, and the worst place I hate that I've done myself was going to Japan. You know, I went over 4 or 5 times, and of course back then you went for 6 weeks at a time. That's a long time, and they didn't have no McDonald's and stuff. You know, now they've got some, and you know, you go to some of them little towns outside of Tokyo or Osaka, the big towns, you know, and you sometimes you'd have to sleep on the floor like the Japanese folks do all the time. You know, you get to some of them towns and they didn't even have beds, and then you'd have to eat rice and fish and stuff, you know. So that was a different time too, you know. And I look back, and that of all, I wish I'd went to Japan more than I did.
Well, Japan had more stiff matches, more different style of matches. Like, they were tough. Like, I've seen different experience from other wrestlers. Like Rene Dupree says, if you want to get into the physical style of matches, you go to Japan.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And you had to, not fight, but if you let them take advantage of you, they'd eat you up. So you had to stand your ground. That's for sure.
I mean, you had to work with the likes of Giant Baba, right?
Yeah, I worked. I didn't work with Baba. I worked for Baba. I wrestled with Tenru, Jumbo.
What about Johnny Ace?
You know, Johnny, he wrestled. he was in Georgia when I was there. Him and Shane Douglas is the Dynamic Dudes. They did the skateboard thing. You remember that?
Yeah, him and Douglas, like during the Georgia territory. Yeah, they had a team and they had a solid run. And then he just eventually went to Japan.
Yeah, and then, Johnny made shoot. He went over a lot. I mean, he did really well over there.
I was over in Japan. I am the Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin all in one.
That's him.
That dude, I don't know what is it with this guy, but everybody talks about how this guy can be a good storyteller, but then makes up shit sometimes. Like, how do you call yourself the Rock and Stone Cold in Japan? But hey, he must have been really good in the matches. I mean, they wouldn't put him over there for nothing.
I know, and he went for a while. I mean, I was never there when he was there, but you'd always hear people talking about him over there. I mean, he was over.
Yeah, in Japan, but I guess in some ways that's just how it goes. But did you ever have to work in Puerto Rico or not?
I went over there a couple of times. Before what happened to Bruiser, I went over there a few times, and that was a different experience too. You talk about some wild folks. I was in the ring, and they don't just throw cups. If they had a whiskey bottle or whatever, and I was a baby face. But they throw a bottle, you don't know who it's going to hit. I've seen them come over the ring. And of course, guys like Brody, man, they would throw everything but the kitchen sink at him. It was and he was over in Puerto Rico. But it was of course I seen Abdullah the same thing, and fans just go nuts. Me, it wasn't quite as bad because I was a baby face. They were heels. And then people, they didn't care. Of course, you wrestled in outdoor stadiums and stuff, so pretty much bring in what you wanted to, I guess.
Yeah, and it's a different style of wrestling. It's kind of like exactly a little bit like ECW if you think about it. The hardcore style of matches, the way they do it, it's like intense. And that's where when you look at Brody's matches, it's mostly all hardcore matches. If you look at it, that was before they even called it hardcore. It was like a brawl style.
You're right. I mean, yeah, that was hardcore matches going on. I mean, it's like used to. I mean, they don't do them no more because they do ladder matches and stuff. But shoot, I remember those street fights, Texas death matches, a chain match. You don't see none of that stuff no more. And them people love that stuff.
Yeah, and then you had the one called the scaffold match where it was invented by Jerry Jarrett before certain people did it. Like, I don't know if you've ever. Oh, you did that?
I did that. And I told him, I said, I ain't doing it. He said, yes, you are. Anyway, we walked in before the matches, and they had that scaffold up. And, of course, I'm scared. I told you I was a ground man anyway. This thing, it was 20 foot above the ring, but the ring was like 3 or 4 foot off the ground. So when you got up there, you were staring at the folks in the top of the building. I never did stand up. I was scared to death. It was me and Austin Idol against Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee. And, of course, Bill, he done scaffolding or something in Australia, and he's up there jumping around on that thing. I thought, would you please settle down, But I was on one of Jerry Jarrett's scaffold matches, too.
Yeah, there was matches that's the one matches I don't see much often, like as much in wrestling. You don't see the scaffold match because it's a lot of risk on it. So it's like.
Yeah, and it was. I mean, that's I started climbing down before I let them knock me off. I mean, I wasn't about to fall off the top of that scaffold, But yeah, that's probably the most dangerous one. But if you're not scared of heights, it might not have been too bad. But me, I seen them do a backdrop on it. Ain't no way, I'd do that. But,
it's like
guys weren't scared of the sky. I mean, they did quite a few of them there in Tennessee, and some of the guys you'd be amazed. I mean, just what they would do up on the scaffold. Mine was lack of, but they did. Some of the guys would get up there and it not bother them and do all kind of stuff.
Some people just have that fearless mentality, but then there's some that are just afraid. Like there was this one scaffold match where actually Jim Cornette tore his ACL in that day in '86 in the American Bash or something, where he was involved in the angle match and then he was on top of the scaffold. And I guess Bubba Rogers was supposed to catch him, and I guess for whatever reason it was the worst timing, and then he injured himself in that match.
I mean, that's a long way to dadgum fall, even if even if you know what you're doing, let alone just falling. And like you said, you tear your leg up and you're out for a year. I mean, see, and that's what I respect about these guys today. I mean, because they put their life on the line. I mean, some of the stuff they do, I mean, paralyze you, kill you, whatever. I mean, because they do some dangerous stuff. Hats off to them because I sure couldn't do it.
That's a risk-taking match, especially when you look at matches like New Jack. He kind of puts it into another level. Especially.
I've seen New Jack in some of the buildings go up in the bleachers and jump 20 foot down on the guy. I mean, just he did do some crazy stuff.
I mean, there was that one incident where he had like animosity towards that Grime guy, and he wanted to get payback on him.
Was that the kid in Florida?
I think so. The Vic Grimes guy, or whatever his name is.
Yeah, in Florida where he cut him or something.
Where he hit his forehead right there.
Yeah, I heard he cut him. I don't know. I've just heard the stories about that. I wasn't there, but it was stuff like that to give him such a bad name.
Yeah, and then no way, no other promotion wanted to touch him, so they said, he's too dangerous.
No, I mean, because he'd do it. Now that he would do stuff like it, just stupid, but. Yeah, like I said, I never did run with him too much, so I don't know him that well.
But I'm pretty sure you know what it's like to work with Honky Tonk Man Wayne Ferris, right?
I know Honky Tonk. He wasn't a Honky Tonk. I met him in Tennessee. He's Jerry Lawler's cousin.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, but Wayne was good. I mean, I don't like when he went. I knew him when he was just Wayne Ferris. I didn't know him when he got, like when he went to WWE. A lot of people said he changed. I don't know. He's always been the same to me. I mean, I see him at some of these signings every now and then, and he's just an old country boy to me. As a matter of fact, I seen David Schultz. I was in Hamburg, New Jersey, and David Schultz was there. I ain't seen him. He broke in Tennessee like right after I did. And I hadn't seen him in years. Them conventions are good because you get to see guys you ain't got to see in a while. So it's pretty cool to go to them.
Yeah, especially, with a guy like him, and then you're doing these autographs too. Like, you get these reunions with a lot of these wrestlers when you do these events too. So it's like you catch on. It's like a high school reunion when you have It seems like it, because it takes like every 10 or 20 years to do like a little event with them. And then it's kind of cool to catch on with them because you guys did it together. So it's like, man.
Well, I'm going to Cauliflower Alley this year. I'm really looking forward to that. I had never been, so this will be a first time for me. So really looking forward to going and seeing all the guys and everything there too.
Yeah, it should be fun, and especially watching a lot of the old school wrestling. I just have more appreciation for guys like you who've paved the way for a lot of these young stars. I mean, if it wasn't for guys like you, I don't think you wouldn't have these other stars in today's wrestling because they do a different style. You guys are doing more of a physical, tough style, like get it done type of mentality.
Well, it's like we went to the same town. Like every Monday, I was in Augusta, Georgia. Every Tuesday, Macon, Georgia. Every Wednesday, Columbus, Georgia, so on. And we did it week in and week out. As far as territories, I don't think you could do that no more. But I guess just because the TV is just national now. But like you'd get when it was territories, you might not know so much. Start in Georgia and be so-so, and then go to Florida and get a little bit better break. And then you go to Kansas City and maybe push you on top. So you could learn. Now then, you just got one opportunity now. You either make it or you don't. If you start for WWE or one of the other organizations, then if you don't make it there, you're not going to make it nowhere else, because they've done seen you on that TV. So I think the opportunities for us was even the guys underneath could make a living. If you love the sport, you could make a living wrestling. Not the best living, but you could do what you wanted and travel the country. So it was. It was a good time. Money was money back then. Everything wasn't expensive. We didn't make the money they made, say today, but we didn't do pay-per-views and stuff like that. When I was going, so it's kind of different to say, I didn't make the money I did because we made good money back then.
I mean, you made good enough money. Even in today's wrestling, money's kind of adding up a little bit, but at the time, you guys were working for that money. So it was
Oh
like,
yeah, yeah. You'd work at first. It was 6 days a week. You might do two TVs. You'd work 6 to 7, 8 times, and then they figured out Sunday would work too. They could run Sunday, so you'd work 7 days a week and maybe 10 times in a week. Sometimes doing TVs and all of that, you'd work 10 times.
yeah, those were like the days. I mean, especially during this time. I mean, you guys had a good work schedule, but the payoff wasn't much compared, but you guys were working for it. And so it was like,
Yeah, and it was 7 days a week. So you could make a good living. Uh, and it just I don't know. I think the '80s was a better time. '80s, '90s. I think it's harder for guys now to break in the business than it. Well, I don't say it's harder. You just don't have the opportunity that you did back in the days when it was NWA, because it was probably 40 to 50 territories. Like I said, if you didn't make it here, you might make it here. You didn't give up on your dream, man. I'm still dreaming.
you still dream.
Very
You still,
blessed, very blessed. And that's because all of our wrestling fans. I mean, your following, our following. It's always great to be on guys like your show. I've certainly enjoyed being on here. I mean, great questions. Uh, it's nice to talk to somebody about the wrestling and still let people know old school is alive.
it's still around. It's just some of these new generation don't get the way wrestling was supposed to be. You look at different style of wrestling, the way they work for it. Now you just get a lot of these talents that just don't want to even bother to show up at times, and they just think, "Oh, I'm getting paid. I don't care."
Yeah, it's shoot. I mean, like if you got hurt back then, you wrestled hurt. I mean, you didn't get paid if you didn't. So you wasn't on a contract, so you had to go. You had to go work.
Yeah, man, and it's very appreciating for somebody like you. That's kind of like giving us the knowledge, and that's all that matters. I mean, you and Ricky Morton kind of been in the business at the same time. You guys have been teaching how this should be, but it's changed over the years. But you guys can definitely give these young stars a little knowledge here and there. But if you ever had a chance to come back in the business, would you even consider yourself to come back as a manager or not?
Well, I mean, never say never. You never say never. I mean, if it was the right situation, I mean, I enjoy doing what I'm doing now. Like I said, very blessed. Folks still know who Tommy Wildfire Rich is. And so when I go to the conventions and the meet and greets and the personal appearances, I mean, they know me as good as they do some of the younger guys now. So it's just a blessing. It makes you feel good because I know that some of these kids coming up, that their parents had to show them some YouTube to know who Tommy Rich is. So it gives you a good feeling. And like I said, if it wasn't for the fans, you wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here. Would none of us be here. So just to all the wrestling fans out there, very appreciated. Because without them, it wouldn't be no me. So
Yeah,
and we got paid for putting asses in the seat. I mean, if it was a bad house, then you didn't make money. It wasn't no guarantees. So, it was a different world then.
definitely is. So definitely appreciate you being on the show. I know it's getting almost past that hour timeline, dude. You can just say, man, it was fun. We were discussing good wrestling topics, and you're a good storyteller, and I loved a lot of your classic matches. You're like the most underrated wrestler in the business, man. Like you could have got a little bit of more of title pushes. Maybe you could have won the NWA multiple times at least, but I guess they just never bothered to give you another push again.
Just old rebel, man. Old rebel rouser, I reckon. Hey, but I wouldn't change it for the world, man. Hey, thank you for having me on the show. Thank all the wrestling fans out there for tuning in to CG. Been a pleasure being on the Ruthless Show, and maybe we'll do it again.
Yeah, we will. And looking forward to that autograph, man, because it's got to be the most legendary.
I got your address.
Yeah, man, because
you can bet on that.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you a shout out, man. Say, hey, I got signed by Tommy Rich.
Okay, you have to hold it up where you can say he did send it.
All right, I got you, man. But thank you, sir, and definitely see you down the road, man.
Hey, thank you, CG, man. You have a great day. All the fans out there, y'all have a great day. And this is the man now. You better tune in. Somebody say, hey, you remember Freddie Miller?
Freddie Miller? Yeah.
He was an announcer. Don't miss it. Be there.